We know the fearsome Roman legionnaires, men who fought and spilled their blood all over Europe. But to be so skilled, they needed one essential thing: training. Learn how the legionnaires were recruited and trained here and now. Rome needed, on average, between 7,500 and 10,000 new recruits annually to replace those fallen in combat, the deserters or the sick, and also to replace the legionaries who were discharged. Indeed, recruits were plentiful, as being a legionnaire offered numerous benefits. Food and accommodation were guaranteed, as well as a fixed salary that could increase over time thanks to promotions, in addition to additional income such as when they looted a city or an emperor came to power, and upon retirement they hoped to receive a plot of land to cultivate. Obviously, being a legionnaire also had its disadvantages, mainly because they fought on the front line, risking their lives. They had to obey orders without complaining, even if it meant their death, and they could receive very harsh punishments, which you can learn about by clicking on the link shown at the top of the screen. Let's start with the recruitment. Even before the recruitment began, candidates were investigated to primarily know two things. The first was whether they had a criminal record, as they didn't want wrongdoers in the legions, since they would probably be more reluctant to obey orders. The second was to verify that they were Roman citizens, as remember, only those who had Roman citizenship were allowed to enlist in the legions. Once this was verified and approved, the selection process began. Candidates had to be around 20 years old, and to enter the first cohorts, they had to have a minimum height of 1.72 meters. Although well into the empire, the minimum height was lowered to 1.65 meters. However, if a recruit did not reach the minimum height but was sturdy, he was also allowed to enlist. Priority was given to men from the countryside, as it was assumed that they were used to a hard life, so they would better withstand the rigors of military life. The candidate's health status was also studied, such as diseases, ailments, or even dental health. A certain simplicity and ignorance in the candidate was also sought, with the aim that they would not question orders. However, on the other hand, it was also sought that some recruits were literate so that they could occupy administrative positions. Points were also given to those who had practiced a useful profession to the legions, such as blacksmiths, carpenters, butchers, or hunters. As in any job, recommendation letters could also be used to make the selection process easier and more pleasant for the candidate. If they were declared fit, their recruitment was finalized and they were assigned to the unit where they would march with the rest of the recruits. We already have our recruits at their destination, but of course they don't know how to do anything, so it's time to start the instruction. First, they were taught to march in step. This may seem easy, but for an entire battalion, that is 80 men, to march at the same rhythm is not so much, so it was not a matter of hours. By the way, now that I have mentioned the century, if you will, continuing with the training. Once they marched at the same pace, it was time to make long marches. And by marches, I mean 30-kilometer journeys, that is, without military equipment or anything. Little by little, the recruits were able to make these marches in less time. And when they managed to do it in 5 hours, they moved on to the next phase. Now they should make the same journey, but loaded with all the equipment: weapons, armor, cooking utensils, stakes, shovels, and rations for several days. When they were able to make these 30-kilometer marches in 5 hours, and with all the equipment, they added a new point of difficulty. At the end of the marches, they had to build a fortified camp to spend the night. The construction speed had to be reduced over time, until it was between 2 and 3 hours. If you don't know how these march camps were built, You can do it by clicking on the link shown at the top of the screen. Finally, they had to be able to march with all the equipment for a distance of 36 kilometers in 5 hours. In addition to this, they did a series of games and competitions such as races, jumps, or swimming. Once they were in good physical shape, they began to familiarize themselves with the orders of the officers and the handling of the weapons. The military training equipment consisted of a thick wooden sword and a very heavy wicker shield. And I say heavy because this shield weighed twice as much as the standard escudum, so if they were able to fight with the wicker shield in battle, they would use the escudum as part of their body. The recruits began by attacking a thick stick stuck in the ground. From the beginning, they were taught to throw short thrusts, covering themselves at all times behind their shields, as they were aware that a wound about 3 or 4 centimeters deep in the right place caused death. They had to practice stabbing on vital areas of the enemy, quickly and without throwing their shield aside. Something we constantly see in medieval or Roman movies. They also learned to throw the pila, which were an essential part of the Legionnaires' military equipment. They would throw them at the enemy before clashing hand to hand. It's not easy to throw a pilum or a javelin, so it required its due time. At the same time, they also learned to obey orders, to maintain formation, and to know their place in each formation. Likewise, they incessantly practiced the different Roman formations, which you can learn about by clicking the link shown at the top of the screen. They had to be able to switch, for example, from a shield wall formation to a square or a testudo. They had to practice everything over and over again so that they would execute the maneuvers in battle without hesitation, both mechanically and automatically, trusting in the good judgment of the commanding general. When they mastered these skills, they could progress from wooden swords and wield real gladius, although yes, covered with leather to avoid accidents. Parades, mock battles, and sieges were regularly held, so that the recruits would get used to the chaos of battle and not be caught off guard. In fact, the Jewish historian Flavius mentions that these mock battles were so real that they could hardly be distinguished from a real battle. Well, we now have the recruit ready for combat, in good physical shape and with knowledge of the formations and orders he could receive. However, he was still considered a rookie and would not stop being one until he participated in a real battle against the enemy. At that moment, he officially became a legionnaire. Men who were not able to pass the training were rejected and had to return on their own to their homes or wherever they wanted. Marches and drills were a common thing in the legions, whether they were veterans or not. While some did it as a routine, others did it for their own survival, to practice. For example, the legions settled in Hispania in the 1st century AD would not face many dangers, so the drills were just a simple routine. However, the legions settled on the border with Germania or in Britannia had to always be in shape and in optimal conditions to successfully repel any attack that the barbarians decided to launch. And gentlemen, that's it for today's video. I hope you liked it. If so, give it a like and subscribe to not miss any videos.